Hey, it's Brennan, and I'm back, and this is the second lecture. Um, just a couple of things to start off with. This week, you should be starting your research project. You should see that in the modules. Also, next, what we should look at is making sure that you have completed your Canvas orientation quiz. That is part of your grade, so please go ahead and complete that. So, Chapter 2. This chapter provides the roadmap for the remainder of the book, introducing the key information privacy concepts and indicating how they relate to one another. The chapter begins by defining key terms in the field of information privacy. Then, in sections 2.2 and 2.3, we introduce the concepts of privacy by design and privacy engineering. Sections 2.4 through 2.6 deal with the relationship between privacy and security, the trade-off between privacy and utility, and the concept of usable privacy. The term privacy is used frequently in ordinary language as well as in philosophical, political, and legal discussions. However, there is no single definition or analysis or meaning of the term. A good survey of this topic is the privacy entry in the Standard Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Two general characteristics of privacy are the right to be left alone, that is, free from being observed or disturbed, and the ability to control the information released about oneself. The book is concerned with the concept of privacy referred to as information privacy. ITU-T Recommendation X800, the Security Architecture for Open Systems Interconnection, defines privacy as the right of individuals to control or influence what information related to them may be collected and stored, and by whom and to whom that information may be disclosed. A U.S. National Research Council report at the nexus of cybersecurity and public policy, uh, some basic concepts and issues indicate that in context of the information, the term privacy usually refers to making ostensibly private information about an individual unavailable to parties that should not have that information. Privacy interests each to the other gathering, control, protection, and use of information about individuals. Personally identifiable information. Now, this is where we get to the core concepts of what privacy is. So, information privacy generally pertains to what is known as personally identifiable information, or what we'll refer to it from now on as PII, as opposed to, say, video surveillance. PII is information that can be used to distinguish or trace an individual's identity. NIST SP 800-122, Guide to Protecting the Confidentiality of Personally Identifiable Information, gives the following examples of information that might be considered PII. Name, right there. This is such as the full name, the maiden name, mother's maiden name, or alias. Personal identification numbers, such as social security numbers, passport numbers, driver's license numbers, taxpayer identification numbers, patient identification numbers, and financial account or credit card numbers. Address information such as your street address, your home address, your mailing address, or even your email address can be considered PII. Asset information such as Internet Protocol or Media Access Control address of host-specific characteristic identifiers that consistently link to a particular person or to a small, well-known group of people. Telephone numbers, including mobile, business, and personal numbers. Personal characteristics, including the photographic images, especially of the face or other distinguishing characteristics. X-rays, fingerprints, or other biometric image or template data, such as a retinal scan, voice signature, or facial geometry, can be considered that. And information identifying personally owned property such as vehicle registration numbers or title numbers or related information. And information about an individual that is linked or linkable to one of the above, uh, indicators, which can be date of birth, place of birth, race, religion, weight, activities, geographic indicators, employment information, medical information, education information, or financial information. In dealing with privacy of PII, two new concepts have emerged: privacy by design and privacy engineering. The goal of privacy by design is to take the privacy requirements into account throughout the system development process, from the concept of a new IT system through the detailed design, implementation, and operation. ISO 29100, Information Technologies, Security Techniques, and Privacy Framework views privacy by design as the practice of considering privacy safeguard measures at the time of the design of the system that it is. Designers should consider privacy compliance during the design phase for the system processing PI rather than address compliance only at a subsequent stage. Privacy engineering involves taking into account the privacy during the entire life cycle of what we call ICT, which is the Information and Communications Technology Systems, such that privacy is and remains an integral part of their function. NIST IR 8062, which is called an Introduction to Privacy Engineering and Risk Management in Federal Systems, defines privacy engineering as the specialty discipline of system engineering focused on achieving freedom from conditions that can create problems for individuals with unacceptable consequences that arise from the system as it processes PII. Privacy engineering focuses on implementing techniques that decrease privacy risks and enables organizations to make purposeful decisions about resource allocation and effective implementation of controls in information systems. Such techniques decrease the risks to privacy harms and to enable purposeful decisions about resource allocation and effective implementation of controls. Now, EDPS, or the European Data Protection Supervisor, an independent institution of European Union at the European Union, relates the concepts by indicating the two principles of privacy by design must be translated into privacy engineering methodologies. Figure 2.1 provides an overview of the major activities and tasks involved in integrating information privacy protection into information systems developed by an organization. The upper part of the figure encompasses design activities that deal with determining what is needed and how to satisfy requirements. The lower part of the figure deals with the implementation and operation of privacy features as part of the overall system. Pause the video here and just kind of read through those design flows. Now we come to this, which is a useful guide to the development of privacy by design approach as a set of foundational principles for privacy by design, or PBD, first proposed by Anne Kevorkian, the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. These principles were later widely adopted as a resolution by other prominent policymakers at the 32nd Annual International Conference of Data Protection and Privacy Commissioners meeting. Now, Figure 2.2 illustrates the foundation of principles of privacy by design, which are further described in the list that follows. Proactive, not reactive. Preventative, not remedial. PBD is an approach that anticipates privacy issues seeks to prevent problems before they arise. In this approach, designers must assess the potential vulnerabilities in a system and the types of threats that may occur, and then select technical and managerial controls to protect the system. Privacy is a default. This principle requires an organization to ensure that it only processes the data that is necessary to achieve its specific purpose, and that the PII is protected during collection, storage, use, and transmission. In addition, individuals must or need to not take affirmative action to protect PII. Basically, this means PII should always be protected. Privacy embedded into design. Privacy protections should be core, organic functions, not added on after a design is complete. Privacy should be both integral, both to the design and architecture of IT systems and to business practices. Full functionality. Positive sum, not zero sum. An essential goal of PBD is that it is not and will not degrade either the system functionality that is required or the security measures that are part of this system. Designers should seek solutions that avoid requiring a trade-off between privacy and system functionality or between privacy and security. End-to-end security lifecycle protection. This principle encompasses two concepts. The terms end-to-end and lifecycle refer to the protection of PII from the time of collection through retention and destruction. During this lifecycle, there should be no gaps in the protection of data or in accountability for the data. The term security highlights the security processes and controls that are used to provide not just security but privacy. The use of security measures ensures the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of PII throughout the lifecycle. Examples of security measures include encryption, access controls, logging methods, and secure destruction. Visibility and transparency. PBD seeks to assure users and other stakeholders that privacy-related businesses practices and technical controls are operating according to state commitments and objectives. Key aspects of this principle are the following. Accountability. The organization should easily document responsibility for all privacy-related policies and procedures. Openness. The organization should provide information about the policies and practices related to managing PII, as well as the individuals and groups accountable for protecting PII within the organization. The concepts of openness include clearly defined organizational privacy policy for internal distribution, as well as a privacy notice available to outsiders, such as web users. Compliance. The organization should have a compliance and redress mechanisms. Now, respect for user privacy. Respect for user privacy. This organization must view privacy as primarily being characterized by personal control and free choice. Key aspects of this principle are the following. Consent. Except where otherwise mandated by law, each individual should be empowered with consent for the collection, use, or disclosure of PII. Accuracy. The organization is responsible for ensuring that any PI that it maintains is accurate and up to date. Access. Individuals should be able to access any PI maintained by an organization, be informed of its uses and disclosures, and be able to challenge its correctness. Compliance. The organization should have compliance and redress mechanisms. Now, these principles are fundamental tenets that guide a privacy program, which an organization must translate into specific practices. The remainder of this section looks at the major activities involved in planning and designing information privacy protection for an information system. In essence, PBD principles are requirements for the way in which systems are designed and implemented. The descriptions throughout the book of the various aspects of information reflect these requirements. Refer to Figure 2.1 and notice that the first stage of privacy by design deals with privacy planning and policy. An essential element of planning for information privacy is the definition of privacy requirements. The specific requirements for privacy features and protections drive the planning, design, and implementation of these features and protections. Key sources of requirements include regulations, standards, and the organizational contractual commitments. Chapter 3, coming up, where we talk about information privacy requirements and guidelines, examines these topics in detail. A key actor at this stage is the system owner, which is the person or organization having responsibility for the development, procurement, integration, modification, operation, maintenance, and final disposition of an information system. The system owner needs to have the ability to identify the standards and regulations that apply and develop an overall plan for privacy milestones during that system development. It is also important to ensure that all key stakeholders have a common understanding, including privacy implications, consideration, and requirements. This planning activity enables developers to design privacy features into the project. An expected output of this activity is a set of supporting documents that provide a record of the agreed planning decisions, including how these decisions conform to overall corporate privacy policy. Another key output is an initial set of privacy activities and decisions related to the overall development of the information system. The ultimate objective of a privacy risk assessment is to enable an organization's executives to determine an appropriate budget for privacy and, within that budget, implement privacy controls that optimize the level of protection. This objective is met by providing an estimate of potential cost to the organization of privacy violations, coupled with an estimation of the likelihood of such breaches. Four elements are involved in that assessment. The first is the privacy-related asset, and that's anything that has value to the organization and that therefore requires protection. With respect to privacy, the primary asset is the PII of employees, customers, patients, business partners, and so on. This category includes intangible assets such as reputation and goodwill. Now, a privacy threat is the next one, a potential for a violation of privacy, which exists when there is a circumstance, a capability, an action, or an event that could violate privacy and cause harm to an individual. That is, a threat that is a possible danger that might exploit a vulnerability. A related term is threat action, which is a realization of a threat. That is, an occurrence in which a vulnerability is exploited as a result of either an accidental event or an intentional act. Privacy vulnerability. Now, this is a flaw or weakness in a system's design, implementation, or operation and management that could be exploited by a threat action to violate the system's privacy policy and compromise PII. Now, last box is privacy controls. The management, operational, and technical controls, i.e. the countermeasures prescribed for an information system to protect PII and ensure that the organization's privacy policy is enforced. Using these four elements, a privacy risk assessment consists of these three steps. Determine the harm, impact to individuals and the organization of a privacy violation. For each privacy-related asset, determine the possible threats to that asset. Then determine the impact to the individuals if their privacy rights are violated, and the impact to the organization in terms of cost or lost value if a threat action occurs. Next, you determine the likelihood of a privacy incident, where a privacy incident is defined as an occurrence that actually or potentially violates the privacy of PII or that constitutes a violation or an imminent threat of violation of privacy policies, privacy procedures, or an acceptable use policies. For each asset, three factors determine the likelihood of the event: the relevant threats to the asset, the vulnerability of the asset to each threat, and the privacy controls currently in place that reduce the likelihood that each threat will cause harm. Determine the levels of risk as the combination of the costs if the privacy incident occurs and the likelihood that the incident occurs. An organization should use the level of risk to determine a budget allocation for security controls. The combination of privacy risk assessment and privacy control selection is referred to as a privacy impact assessment. This is also known as a PIA. In Chapter 11, Risk Management and Privacy Impact Assessment discusses PIAs in detail. Privacy controls are the technical, physical, and administrative or management measures employed within an organization to satisfy privacy requirements. Privacy controls might result in A. Removing the threat source, B. Changing the likelihood that the threat can exploit a vulnerability by reducing or eliminating the vulnerability, or by changing the amount of PII collected or the way it's processed. C. Changing the consequences of a privacy event. You know, so two especially valuable sources of information on privacy controls can be used as a guide in control selection. NIST 853, Security and Privacy Controls for Information Security in Organizations, is invaluable and extraordinarily detailed discussion of controls and should be consulted in the development of any risk treatment. This 500-page document provides plenty of guidance on the overall development and treatment plan. It includes an extensive catalog of security controls and privacy controls. ISO 29151, the Code of Practice for Personally Identifiable Information Protection, offers guidance on a broad range of privacy controls that are commonly applied in many different organizations that deal with the protection of PII. In Part 4, Privacy Enhancing Technologies, that provides a detail of technical privacy controls that can be implemented as part of an IT system or subsystem. Part 5 includes a discussion of administrative and managerial controls. It's a good reference that all of you students in cybersecurity should keep handy on your desktop. NIST 853 is imperative that you learn and just keep it there. Security controls are safeguards or countermeasures prescribed for an information system or an organization that are designed to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of its information and to meet a set of defined security requirements. As discussed in Section 2.4, there is an overlap in the areas of concern of information security and information privacy. Security controls, when selected and implemented for information systems that create, use, process, store, maintain, disseminate, disclose, and dispose of PII, address both security and privacy concerns. For example, access control mechanisms can be used to limit the access to PII stored in a database. Nonetheless, individual privacy cannot be achieved solely by securing personally identifiable information. Hence, both security and privacy controls are needed. Selecting and documenting security and privacy controls should be synchronized with the risk assessment activity. Typically, a baseline set of controls is selected, and then it is kind of adjusted and adapted and modified with additional controls based on the refinement of the risk assessment. The refinement considers any possible secondary risks that result from the baseline controls and how they affect that risk assessment. The principal objective of privacy by design is to ensure that information privacy considerations are considered at every stage of system development and that the privacy protection measures are designed into that system during system design and development rather than retrofitted. An essential element in achieving this objective is documented and approved by an approved privacy program. Elements of this plan should include identifying key individual roles that will be active throughout the system design and implementation, identifying standards and regulations that apply, developing an overall plan for privacy milestones during system development, ensuring that all stakeholders have a common understanding, including privacy implications and considerations and requirements, and describing the requirements for integrating privacy controls within the system and the process of coordinating privacy engineering activities with the overall system development. And part of the privacy program document or provided as a separate document is a privacy plan that deals with the implementation of privacy features and their integration with the rest of the system. This is a formal document that provides an overview of the privacy requirements for the information system and describes the privacy controls that are in place or planned for meeting those requirements. Key components of the plan are a privacy categorization, which gives the acceptable level of risk for each distinct element of the system, and a description of each privacy control in its implementation plan. This stage should also produce a detailed architecture that incorporates privacy features and controls into the system design. Expected outputs include a schematic privacy integration that provides details on where within the system privacy is implemented and, if applicable, where privacy mechanisms are shared by multiple services or applications. A list of shared resources sharing that result at risk, and identification of controls and used by the system should also be included in that mix. Here we have figure 2.1 that indicates that privacy engineering encompasses the implementation, deployment, and ongoing operation and management of privacy features and controls in the system. Privacy engineering involves both the technical capabilities and management processes. The primary goals of privacy engineering are one, to incorporate functionality and management practices to satisfy privacy requirements. 2, prevent compromise of PII. 3, mitigate the impact of breach of personal data. Now, although figure 2.1 shows privacy engineering as being distinct from and following on PBD, the term privacy engineering, it is often used to encompass privacy-related activities throughout the system development lifecycle. An example of this is shown in figure 2.3, which is adapted from NIST or NIST IR 8062. As illustrated in figure 2.3, the NIST document lists 5 components of privacy engineering, 2 that are specific to the privacy engineering processes, and 3 that are components typically used in information security management. The components are, first, the security risk assessment. A security risk is an expectation of loss expressed in the probability that a particular threat will exploit a particular vulnerability with a particular harmful result. Security risk assessment is the process that systematically identifies valuable resources and threats to those resources, then quantifies loss exposures, that's just loss potential, based on estimated frequencies and costs of the occurrence. Therefore, risk assessment follows 2 parallel paths. First, for each threat to a resource, The value of the resource is assessed and the potential impact or cost if the threat to that resource becomes successful threat action. Secondly, based on the strength of the threat, the probability of the threat becoming an actual threat action, and the vulnerability of that resource. A likelihood of a successful threat action is determined. Finally, the potential impact, the threat, and the likelihood of its success are factors in determining the risk. Risk management. In this slide, we'll look at how NIST 837 Risk Management Framework for Information Systems and Organizations states that the risk management included in a disciplined structure and flexible process for organizational asset valuation, security, and privacy control selection, implementation, and assessment, the system and control authorizations, and the continuous monitoring of those systems. It also includes enterprise-level activities to help better prepare organizations to execute the RMF, aka the Risk Management Framework, at the system level. Risk management is an iterative process, as illustrated in Figure 2.4, based on 1 NITU-TX 1055, Risk Management and Risk Profile Guidelines for Telecommunications Organizations. And this consists of 4 steps. The first being assess risk based on assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and existing controls. From these inputs, determine the impact and likelihood, and then the level of the risk. This is the risk assessment component described in the preceding bullet. Now, identify potential security controls to reduce that risk, prioritize their use, and select controls for implementation. Then next, the third one is to allocate resources, roles, and responsibilities, and implement the controls. And fourth is to monitor and evaluate risk treatment effectiveness. So determines, okay, if what we implemented and what we planned out and described, are they good, or are they just good enough, or how do we adjust to that? Now, in the context of privacy engineering, the emphasis is on privacy risk and the implementation of privacy controls. We'll discuss that more in Chapter 11, where we discuss and focus on risk management. Now, the privacy requirements. These are system requirements that have privacy relevance. System privacy requirements define protection capabilities provided by the system, the performance and behavioral characteristics exhibited by the system, and the evidence used to determine that the system privacy requirements have been satisfied. Privacy requirements are derived from a variety of sources, including laws, regulations, standards, and stakeholder expectations. In Chapter 3, we'll examine privacy requirements. Now, privacy impact analysis. The NIST Computer Security Glossary defines the PIA is a way to analyze how much information is handled, or how that information is actually handled, not how much, and to ensure that the handling conforms to applicable legal, regulatory, and policy requirements regarding policy, and to determine the risks and effects of collecting, maintaining, and disseminating information in identifiable form in an electronic information system. And 3, to examine and evaluate protections and alternative processes for handling information to mitigate potential privacy risks. In essence, the PIA consists of a privacy risk assessment followed by a selection of privacy and security controls to reduce the risk. We'll look more about dealing with the PIA in Chapter 11. Privacy engineering and security objectives. Now, when we talk about this, information security risk assessment focuses on meeting the common security objectives, including confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As you can see, this is very similar in Figure 1.1 here. Similarly, privacy engineering objectives focus on the types of capabilities that the system needs in order to demonstrate implementation of an organization's privacy policies and system policy requirements. NIST IR 8062 proposes three privacy objectives, as illustrated in Figure 2.5 below on the screen here. Chapter 3 expands on this topic. During the privacy implementation stage, developers configure and enable system privacy features. Implementation includes alignment and integration of privacy controls with specific functional features. As part of implementation, an organization should perform developmental testing of the technical and privacy features and functions to ensure that they perform as intended prior to launching the integration phase. System integration activity occurs at the point of deployment of the system for operation. Privacy control settings are enabled and other privacy features need to be integrated at this point. The output of this activity is a verified list of operational privacy controls integrated into the completed system documentation. Privacy testing includes the following types of testing. Functional testing. This is advertised privacy mechanisms in an information system are tested under operational conditions to determine whether the given function works according to its requirements. Penetration testing. This is where evaluators mimic real-world attacks and attempt to identify ways to circumvent the privacy features of an application, such as an application, a system, or a network. And then we have user testing, finally. The software or system is tested in the real world by intended audience. It's also called user end testing. Privacy implementation and evaluation. And in this stage should be the result in the final management certification and accreditation of the system with its privacy features. Certification involves a comprehensive assessment of the management, operational, and technical privacy controls in an information system to determine the extent to which the controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome with respect to meeting the security requirements for the system. Accreditation is the official management decision given by a senior agency official to authorize the operation of an information system and to explicitly accept the risk to agency operations, including the mission, functions, image, and reputation, agency assets, or individuals based upon the implementation of an agreed upon set of privacy controls. In the privacy auditing and incident response stage, systems and products are in place and operating. Enhancements or modifications to systems are developed and tested, and hardware or software is added or replaced. During this stage, the organization should continuously monitor performance of the system to ensure that it is consistent with pre-established privacy requirements and that the needed system modifications are incorporated. Two key activities during the stage are as follows. Auditing. This involves the independent examination of records and activities to ensure compliance with established controls, policy, and operational procedures, and to recommend any indicated changes in controls, policies, or procedures. Incident response. An IT security incident is an adverse event in a computer system or network caused by the failure of a security mechanism or an attempted or threatened breach of such mechanisms. Incident responses involve the mitigation of violations of security policies and recommended practices. Although security and privacy are related, they are not equivalent. Figure 2.6 shows a non-proportional representation of the relationship between the privacy and security domains. While some privacy concerns arise from unauthorized activity, privacy concerns also can arise from the authorized processing of information about individuals. Recognizing the boundaries and the overlap between privacy and security is key to determining when existing security key risk models and security-focused guidance may be applied to address privacy concerns, and where there are gaps that need to be filled in order to achieve an engineering approach to privacy. For instance, existing information security guidance does not address the consequence of a poor consent mechanism for the use of PII. The purpose of transparency, what PII is often collected, and the collection and correction of PII, or which changes in which PII are permitted if authorized personnel are conducting the activity. Given these material distinctions in these disciplines, it should be clear that agencies will not be able to effectively manage privacy solely on the basis of managing security. Here we look at Figure 2.7. This comes from the technical paper, Privacy Fundamentals, What an Information Security Officer Needs to Know. This diagram further illustrates the overlapping distinctions between security and privacy by listing key objectives. Some of the objectives, such as availability, system and data protection from threats, and physical protection, are primarily information security objectives. Objectives dealing with specifically the management and use of PI are primarily exclusive primary objectives. The technical paper just mentioned 5 objectives that are relevant to both privacy and security. These are accountability, integrity, aggregation, confidentiality, and destruction of data. Now, Table 2.1 indicates the difference in emphasis for each objective for privacy and security. Pause the video and review this slide and notice the differences between security and privacy. Now that you've read through that, we can go on to talk about privacy versus utility. An important consideration in the provision of privacy features in an information system or database is the potential conflict between the privacy of PII and the potential utility of the collections of PII to third parties. In this context, the term utility can be defined as a quantifiable benefit to multiple legitimate information consumers. How specifically to quantify the utility of information depends on the nature of the information and the application context. Utility and privacy are often competing requirements. Any access of the data that contains or is derived from PII has the potential to leak information that the source of PII wishes to keep private. On the other hand, increasing the privacy restrictions on the information increases the restrictions on the flow of potentially useful information. For example, databases of individual data records can facilitate beneficial research in areas such as public health, medicine, criminal justice, and economics. Several strategies can be used to protect privacy, such as making available data only aggregations of data, or removing key identities and identifiers, or altering values of sensitive attributes before releasing the data. It should be clear that the more aggressive the measure to protect privacy, the less utility the information will have for researchers. Figure 2.8 illustrates the trade-off between utility and privacy. With no specific measures taken, there is a clear loss of privacy with increased utility and vice versa. One of the objectives of privacy by design and privacy engineering is to provide technical and managerial safeguards to privacy while enabling a high degree of utility. The upper line in the figure indicates this. And if you don't really get it, that's the dotted line. Like utility, usability is an important constraint in privacy by design and privacy engineering. ISO 9241-11, the ergonomic requirements for office work with visual display terminals, has a guidance on usability and has the definition for usability as the extent to which a product can be used by specified users to achieve specified goals with effectiveness, efficiency, and satisfaction in a specified context of use. The key terms in this definition are effectiveness, and that is the accuracy and completeness with which users achieve specified goals. This is typically based on error rates. Next comes efficiency. Resources expended in relation to the accuracy and completeness with which users achieve goals. This is typically based on the time required to complete a task or subtask, taking into account the accuracy goals. Next is satisfaction, and this is the freedom from discomfort and positive attitudes toward the use of the product. This is a subjective parameter and can be judged using questionnaires. Next comes the context of use. Users, task, equipment, such as hardware, software, materials, and then the physical and social environments in which a product is used. Now, a user, this is the person who interacts with the product. The goal is the intended outcome. And tasks are an activity, whether it's physical or cognitive, required to achieve a goal. And finally, the product is a part of an equipment, hardware, software, materials for which usability is specified or evaluated. So we're going to look at all these factors in determining user privacy. As we continue, we come to the definition of effectiveness. Now, accuracy and completeness with which users achieve specified goals, and this is typically based on error rates. Next comes efficiency. This is resources expended in relation to the accuracy and completeness with which users achieve their goals. This is typically based on the time required to complete a task or subtask, taking into account accuracy goals. Next comes satisfaction and this is the freedom from discomfort and positive attitudes toward the use of the product. This is a subjective parameter and can be judged using a questionnaire. Context of use. This is where users, task, equipment, such as hardware, software, and materials, and the physical and social environments in which a product can be used. A user is a person who interacts with the product. The goal is the intended outcome of the product. And a product is a part of the equipment, such as hardware, software, and materials, for which usability is specified or evaluated. The National Research Council publication toward better usability, security, and privacy of information technology points out that usability in the context of privacy can refer to three different classes of users. End users of IT systems. These are end users of IT systems who are individuals who wish to have as much control as possible over the privacy of their PII. Examples of privacy services for end users are those that allow individuals to opt in or opt out of certain uses of their PII, enable them to determine the accuracy of their PII stored in databases, and file complaints about PII violations. Frequently, end users find these services difficult to understand and to use. Next come the administrators of IT systems. Administrators need to configure IT systems to enable or disable specific privacy features for individuals or groups of individuals whose PII is stored in the system. Administrators often contend with systems that are difficult to understand and configure. System developers. Developers need usable tools that make it easy to avoid and detect design and coding errors that affect privacy. Now, the terms usability and utility are distinct concepts. Usability refers to the ease of use of privacy features. Now, utility refers to the functionality available for databases containing PI with privacy protection in place. Both concepts need to be considered through the design and implementation and the operation of IT systems containing PII. All right, so we made it to the end of Chapter 2. Make sure you start your research projects and make sure you do your discussion posts. All right, to summarize this chapter, we've explained the difference between privacy by design and privacy engineering. We talked about how to understand the privacy-related activities fit into the development lifecycle. We've defined what a privacy control is. We've discussed the areas of overlap between security and privacy. and those areas that are distinct to either security or privacy. And we explain the trade-off between privacy and utility. And we've also explained the distinction between privacy and usability.